Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Today we're going to get into something, I think all of us have come across at some point, toxic relationships. They're not always like these big dramatic blow-ups.
Right.
It can be kind of this insidious undercurrent that just leaves you feeling like drained and confused. We're actually looking at a script today for a video all about toxic relationships. And even though it was written to be seen,
Hmm.
it's packed with so many, psychological
Yeah.
insights about these dynamics, and I think it can really make you think.
It's interesting, we tend to think about toxic relationships as just being in our personal lives. Right. But this source really kind of gets into how these dynamics can even play out in the workplace.
Yeah, that was something that jumped out at me too. Toxic relationships at work,
Yeah.
which, I mean, it makes sense. You're spending, what, a third of your life
Oh,
with
yeah.
these people.
Yeah.
So those relationships can definitely turn toxic. But, I mean, how do we even know? How do we know if we're in a toxic situation? What are the signs?
That's a great question. And it's something that the source really tackles.
Okay.
Yeah, the problem is that toxicity is not always this big flashing red light.
Right.
It can be subtle. It can be almost like a slow leak in your emotional tire.
Oh, I like
One
that.
of the things it highlights is this idea of constantly walking on eggshells around someone.
Ugh, yeah.
You know,
You're always like anticipating their next reaction, just like trying not to set them out. It's exhausting.
exactly. And that feeling of exhaustion, that's a major indicator.
Yeah.
The source uses visuals of anxiety, fatigue to really like hammer home that toxicity takes a toll on you, on your well-being.
It's like, that analogy of the plant that's being deprived of sunlight and water.
Hmm.
It might not die immediately, but it's definitely not going to be thriving.
Exactly, exactly. And what's fascinating is the source doesn't just focus on like the blatant forms of abuse. It goes into these subtler signs of toxicity,
Okay.
things that we might even just dismiss as, oh, that's just their personality.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. They're just quirky.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so give me an example. Like, what are some of those subtle red flags that we might be missing?
Well, one that really stood out to me was this idea of guilt trips,
Hmm.
where someone kind of subtly manipulates you into like taking the blame or feeling responsible for their emotions.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I've definitely experienced that. I never really thought it as manipulation before.
That's the thing about guilt trips. They can be so subtle that you don't even realize you're being manipulated.
Yeah.
The source really breaks down how these tactics can like eat away at your sense of self-worth over time.
So it's not just like feeling bad in the moment. It's the long-term effects on like your confidence and your self-esteem.
Precisely. And that's why it's crucial to be able to spot these like subtler signs of toxicity,
Right.
because if you don't recognize them, you can't deal with them.
Okay, so we start noticing these red flags. What can we do? I
Well,
know the source talks about setting boundaries, but I mean, how do you actually do that, especially when you're dealing with someone who is just used to getting their own way?
yeah, and that's where it gets interesting. It emphasizes that setting boundaries isn't about controlling the other person or trying to like change them.
Right.
It's about figuring out what you're okay with, what you're not okay with, and protecting your own well-being.
Okay, so it's less about them and more about just taking back your power in the situation. I like that.
Exactly. And it outlines this four-step process for setting boundaries that I found really useful.
All right, let's break that down. What's step one?
The first step is figuring out what behaviors are not okay with you.
Okay.
It's about tuning into your own feelings and acknowledging what crosses the line for you personally.
So before you even communicate anything, you need to be clear on your own limits.
Right.
Makes sense. What's next?
Then step two is actually communicating those boundaries clearly and firmly.
Okay, so no more beating around the bush or like dropping subtle hints.
No more hints.
Okay.
Clarity is key. And it even gives this specific example of how to communicate a boundary. I don't appreciate being spoken to like that.
Ooh, good one.
Nice and direct.
Direct and respectful.
Yeah. But leaves no room for misinterpretation.
Exactly. And that leads to step three, which is all about consistency.
Okay.
The source cautions that toxic people will often test your boundaries
Oh, I bet.
to see if you'll give in. So it's really important to stand your ground and stick to what you've decided.
Yeah, I can imagine that's where it gets super challenging.
Oh, it is.
Especially if you're, working with or have a relationship with someone who's used to pushing your buttons.
Absolutely. But the source emphasizes that holding firm to what you've said
Mm-hmm.
is an act of self-respect. It's showing yourself that your well-being matters.
That's powerful. Okay, so what's the final step in this boundary setting process? Step four, This could be the hardest one, but also the most freeing. It's being ready to like limit or even cut off contact if you need to.
Wow, that's a big one. So the source is really saying that walking away can be the healthiest option.
Yes, and it makes this really crucial point. You don't owe anyone access to you or your life
Right.
if they're constantly hurting you.
That's powerful. That really shifts the focus from, how do I fix this other person
Yeah,
to how do I protect
to I'm going to choose peace
I'm going to choose
and my
peace.
mental health.
Yeah,
And the source reminds us that choosing peace is never selfish.
right.
It's an act of self-care and self-preservation.
This is also so insightful, but I'm also thinking about like the aftermath. Like,
Mhm.
how do you even begin to heal and move on after a toxic relationship,
All right.
especially if it was a long one?
Well, the source offers some really practical advice on that.
Okay,
But I think that's a great place to pause and jump into the next part of our deep dive.
let's do it. All right, so we've talked about, recognizing those red flags, taking those crucial steps to set boundaries. But then what?
Yeah.
How do you actually start to heal and rebuild after getting out of a toxic relationship?
Yeah.
That feels like a whole other mountain to climb.
It is. And the source acknowledges that. That healing process,
Yeah,
it can be just as tough as like setting those initial boundaries,
right.
but it also offers some really practical advice for how to navigate that.
Okay, I'm ready. I need all the advice I can get. I think we all do
Right. Yeah.
when it comes to like mending those emotional wounds.
Well, one of the first things it really emphasizes is self-care. And I know that sounds cliche,
Right.
but it really is like the bedrock of healing.
So what are we talking about here? Like bubble baths and face masks? Or is
Uh-huh.
it something deeper?
It can be those things too, if they bring you joy,
Yeah.
but it goes deeper than that. It talks about like surrounding yourself with positive people, engaging in activities that you love, and even seeking professional help if you need it.
So it's about nourishing like your mind, body, and soul with positivity and support.
Exactly. Creating an environment where you can really heal and thrive. I mean, think about it. If you're constantly surrounded by negativity or you're doing things that just drain you, it's going to be way harder to recover.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's like trying to recover from a physical injury, but you keep doing the things that make it worse. You got to give yourself time and space to heal.
Yes. And that's where the source's emphasis on self-compassion comes in. It reminds us that healing is a process, not a destination. And you're going to have good days and bad days.
Yeah.
It's about being patient with yourself, recognizing, that you've been hurt and celebrating even the small funds.
So no beating yourself up if you like have a bad day
Totally.
or if those negative thoughts creep back in.
Absolutely. It takes time.
Yeah. I am curious though about, professional help.
Yeah,
The source mentions therapy, right?
it does. Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, that could be such a crucial part of the healing journey
Yeah.
because therapy offers you this safe space to process those complex emotions that often come with toxic relationships.
It's like having a guide to help you navigate all of those, treacherous emotional landscapes.
Totally.
Someone who can offer insights and tools to help you move forward in a healthy way.
Love that analogy. And what's so great about therapy is that it's not just about talking about your feelings. It's about understanding those unhealthy patterns that might have even contributed to that toxic dynamic in the first place.
So it's about equipping yourself to have healthier relationships in the future.
Absolutely. Investing in your well-being.
As we're talking about all this, I keep thinking back to those visuals
Mm-hmm.
in the source material, like the anxiety, the exhaustion.
Yeah,
Those images really stuck with me.
me too. Me too. It's one thing to like hear about it,
Right.
but seeing it really makes it so real.
Yeah, like it just drives home that point.
Totally.
Toxicity is not always about those big explosive moments. It can
Mhm.
be just those subtle little things that happen day to day that just slowly chip away at you like a drip, drip, drip of poison.
Death by 1,000 paper cuts, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I also think those visuals were really powerful for highlighting the difference between setting boundaries
Yes.
and trying to control others.
Mm-hmm.
That was something the source emphasized a lot. So how can our listeners tell the difference? What's that line between healthy boundaries and, just trying to control someone else?
Well, the main difference is about intention and focus. Setting boundaries is about figuring out what's acceptable to you,
Right.
protecting your emotional well-being. It's not about telling someone how they should act or trying to change them.
So it's about saying, this is my line, don't cross it,
Yeah.
instead of you need to change who you are to be in my life.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
It's about taking responsibility for your own happiness.
I love how empowering that is. It's
Yeah.
like shifting the dynamic from I'm a victim of your behavior to I have the power to choose how I respond.
Yes. And it's realizing that you deserve to be treated with respect,
Yeah,
regardless of what they do.
that's powerful. And I think that ties into the source's emphasis on, walking away as an act of self-respect.
Totally. It's about recognizing your own worth,
Yeah.
not settling for something that makes you feel bad.
Yeah. But let's be real, walking away is a lot easier said than done,
Oh, yeah,
especially when you've invested so much. I mean, time, emotions,
of
all of
course.
that. The source acknowledges that, right?
It does. And it emphasizes, like, you don't have to go through this alone.
So where can people turn for support during that?
Well, the source talks about building a strong support system.
Okay, so like friends, family, maybe a support group.
Exactly. It's about being around people who lift you up, who get it, who remind you how great you are.
Yeah. It's like building a safety net to like catch you.
Hmm.
They're when you're feeling vulnerable.
I love that. It's beautiful. And those connections are so valuable during times of, change and healing.
Yeah,
They offer a sense of, like, belonging, a reminder that you're not alone,
right.
and a safe space to, like, work through those emotions.
And don't forget professional help.
Yes. Therapy can be such an amazing resource, to, like, help you understand those complex emotions that come up,
Mm.
help you develop healthy ways of coping. It's like having a guide on that journey of healing and self-discovery.
Yeah, someone who can offer like insights and challenge your thought patterns
Totally,
and help
man.
you build those skills to have healthier relationships in the future.
You said it perfectly. And I think that's a great transition to the last part of our deep dive, where we can really get into the long-term benefits of all this.
Okay, so we've really unpacked a lot here. Those red flags, the whole idea of setting boundaries, and even like how to start healing. But what's the payoff? What are those long-term benefits of getting out of those toxic situations and actually putting our well-being first?
That is such a great question. And, it's something that the source really focuses on in its final message. Like, it paints this picture of not just surviving,
Mm-hmm.
but thriving.
I like that. From surviving to thriving.
Yeah.
So it's like there's a whole new level
Yeah.
of fulfillment and peace waiting for us, once we break free from all that toxic stuff.
Exactly. And it starts with this shift in perspective.
Okay.
It's about realizing that you do have the power
Yeah.
to create a better life for yourself, one that's healthier, more fulfilling.
One thing that really hit home for me in this source was, it doesn't sugarcoat things.
Right.
It admits that setting boundaries can be really hard,
It is. Yeah.
especially when you're dealing with someone who's just used to like getting their way.
Right. And I think it's so important to normalize that stroll, because a lot of people, they might feel like, am I doing something wrong?
Yeah. Yeah.
Should I just be more
Should
flexible?
I just give in?
Exactly. But what this source made me see is that those feelings of, like, guilt
Mm-hmm.
or, like, self-doubt, that's often just part of the toxic dynamic itself.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's like their behavior has almost trained you
Right.
to put their needs and their feelings ahead of your own. So, of course, when you start prioritizing yourself, it feels weird.
It's like you have to unlearn all of that.
Yeah, totally. And that's why, the source's message about self-respect, it just really resonated with me.
Yeah.
It's about breaking that cycle, realizing that you deserve to be treated well.
It's about knowing your worth and not settling for anything less.
Yes, and I think, the source actually gives you really practical advice for how to do that. It's not just stop doing that.
Right.
It's about actually saying what your boundaries are clearly, firmly, and then sticking to them.
And we don't have to like over-explain
Nope.
or justify ourselves.
Just a simple, I don't like it when you talk to me that way.
Right. Short, sweet, to the point.
Exactly. But what if they just ignore those boundaries?
Yeah. What happens then?
The source cautions that, people who are toxic,
Mm-hmm.
they'll often test those boundaries.
Yeah. Push back.
Yeah. Trying to see if they can still get away with the same old stuff.
So that's where consistency is key.
Yes.
You gotta stand your ground even when it's uncomfortable.
Even when it's hard. And keep reinforcing those boundaries every time they try to cross them.
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember that setting boundaries is like a journey.
It is.
You might need to tweak things
Mm-hmm.
as you figure out what works best for you.
This whole conversation, it just really underscores that idea that choosing peace,
Yeah.
Putting your well-being first.
Hmm.
It's not selfish. It's actually self-preservation.
Totally. And the source does such a great job of reminding us,
It does.
you are worthy of respect. You deserve to be treated kindly. And you absolutely have the right to protect yourself, your emotions, your mental health, all of that.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into, all things toxic relationships and those all-important boundaries, what's like the one thing you want our listener to walk away with today?
For me, it's realizing that you can make a change. You can create a better life for yourself. It might not be easy. You might have to make some tough choices along the way.
Yeah.
But it's always worth it to put yourself first.
That is so well said. And for you listening, we want you to think about this. What's one small step you can take today to start protecting your peace, to prioritize your mental health? It could be anything. Setting a boundary with someone, doing something nice for yourself, just like reminding yourself that you are worthy. Every little step counts. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.